My name is Jane. For 10 whole years, I stayed in our village's mud brick house, waiting for David. In those 10 years, I went from a girl in her early 20s to a woman whose face was etched with fine lines and whose hands were rough and calloused. My in-laws were in poor health, so every bit of farm work and housework fell solely on my shoulders. I woke up every day before dawn to haul water, cook, feed the pigs, and work the fields. At night, I spent my hours sewing and washing. Even when my back was so sore I couldn't stand straight, I found the strength to keep going just by thinking of what David said before he left. Wait for me to make something of myself, and I'll come back for you. I thought my days of suffering were finally coming to an end. One afternoon, the blare of a car horn echoed at the entrance of the village, shattering the quiet of the countryside. Someone shouted that David was back and looking very sharp. My heart tightened. I dropped my hoe and ran toward the village entrance, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst from my chest. A crowd had already gathered around a shiny black sedan. The door opened, and a man stepped out wearing a tailored suit, his hair slicked back perfectly. It was David, yet he didn't look like the David I remembered. The boyishness was gone, replaced by a look of urban shrewdness and detachment. The fabric of his suit was something I couldn't have afforded in a lifetime. I pushed my way forward, my throat tight and my voice trembling with uncontrollable emotion. "David, you're back!" David looked down at me. There wasn't a hint of warmth or the tenderness of a long-awaited reunion in his eyes, only a flicker of subtle disgust, as if I were something shameful. He frowned and took a half-step back, avoiding my hand as I reached out to him. The chatter around us died down, and every eye was fixed on us. My face burned. I stood there awkwardly, my hands stained with dirt and my coarse cloth tunic covered in dust, forming a jarring contrast to his polished appearance. "Jane," he began. His voice was icy and devoid of warmth, like a winter wind piercing straight into my heart. "I came back to tell you one thing." I looked at him, an inexplicable sense of panic rising within me as a dark premonition flooded my mind. "Go ahead, I'm listening," I whispered. "Let's get a divorce." Those 4 words were spoken lightly, but they hit me like a sledgehammer. I froze, my ears ringing so loudly I couldn't hear the world around me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I stared at his mouth and asked in a shaking voice, What did you say?" "David, stop joking. We've waited 10 years. How could you?" "I'm not joking," David interrupted, his tone impatient and the disgust in his eyes deepening. "I already have a family in the city. She can help me far more than you ever could. If I stay with you, I'll never move up in this world." Every word he spoke was like a knife, flaying me alive. 10 years of waiting, 10 years of sacrifice, 10 years of hoping, and in the end, all I got was "let's divorce, and you're not good enough." I looked at his cold face and the pitying, gossiping eyes of the neighbors. The world started spinning. My chest felt crushed under a massive stone, making it impossible to breathe. I wanted to scream at him, to ask about the bitterness I had endured for a decade, to ask if his old promises meant anything at all. But when I tried to speak, I could only choke on my sobs. Everything began to blur. David's face, the crowd, that shiny car. My body went limp. I couldn't hold myself up any longer. And everything went black as I lost consciousness. Jane, why are you daydreaming? Hurry up. David's family is all here, and they're waiting for you." A familiar voice sounded in my ear, tinged with urgency. I snapped my eyes open. Harsh sunlight streamed through the window and fell across my face. I wasn't at the village entrance or the mud brick house I had lived in for 10 years. I was in the main room of my parents' house. Several square tables were set out, topped with peanuts, melon seeds, and a few pieces of fruit candy. The village elders and David's family were sitting around the tables, chatting and laughing. I looked down at my hands. They were slender and white, without a single callus or crack. These were the hands of a girl in her early 20s. I looked at my clothes. It was the floral tunic my mother had specially made for me, clean and neat. "Jane, what's wrong?" "You're so pale," my mother Sarah said as she walked over. She touched my forehead with a worried look. "Are you feeling okay? You can't flake out on us now." I followed my mother's gaze and saw David sitting in the corner. He was wearing a blue synthetic button-down shirt, looking just as young as he used to. His eyes held a bit of youthful arrogance, but none of that later shrewdness or coldness. His parents, Mr. and Mrs. Miller, were sitting at the table talking to my father, George. Mrs. Miller had a look of condescending pride on her face. The calendar on the wall clearly read May 12th, 1991. My heart skipped a beat as a wave of unbelievable emotion surged through me. I was back. I had actually returned to 1991, to the very day of my engagement to David. The betrayal and agony of my past life were still carved into my very bones. That sense of total, soul-crushing despair felt as if it were still lingering in my heart. Looking at the David before me, who still appeared young and innocent, and seeing the snobbish, superficial face of Mrs. Miller, I clenched my fists. My fingernails dug deep into my palms, and the sharp sting helped me stay focused. In this life, I would never make the same mistake again. David seemed to notice my gaze. He looked up at me with a faint, perfunctory smile and said in a dismissive tone, "Jane, why are you just standing there? Come over and sit down." In my past life, I would have walked over with a heart full of joy, shy and reserved. But now I only shot him a cold look, remaining still and silent. My reaction caused the room to grow quiet for a moment. The smile on David's face froze, and Mrs. Miller stopped talking, frowning at me with dissatisfaction. "Jane, what's going on? David is calling you? Didn't you hear him?" I took a deep breath to suppress the turmoil inside me and looked directly at Mrs. Miller, my voice calm but filled with undeniable resolve. "Ma'am, I have something to say." George frowned and tugged at my arm, lowering his voice. "Jane, whatever it is, talk about it later. Today is your engagement day. Don't be foolish." "Dad, I'm not being foolish," I said, gently pulling my hand away from his. I let my gaze sweep over everyone in the room, finally landing on David, and said word for word, "I'm not going through with this engagement." Those words were like a bomb going off in the room. Mr. Miller stood up abruptly, his usual mild-mannered expression vanishing instantly. "Jane, what are you saying? Please don't joke around. The date is set, and all our friends and relatives are here. You can't just decide not to do it." Mrs. Miller turned pale with rage. She slammed her hand on the table and stood up, screaming at the top of her lungs. "Jane, are you making a fool out of the Miller family? I think you don't know what's good for you. Our David is a handsome, talented man who is bound to be successful, and yet you're unwilling." David's face darkened as well, his eyes filled with shock and anger. "Jane, what is the meaning of this? Everything was fine. Why aren't you going through with it?" I met everyone's eyes without flinching, my voice remaining steady but clear. "It doesn't mean anything. I just don't want to do it anymore. I don't think we're right for each other." "Not right for each other?" Mrs. Miller was shaking with fury. "Why don't you tell us exactly what isn't right? How is our David not good enough for you? Your family isn't as well off as ours. It's good enough that we didn't look down on you, and now you're being picky." "Ma'am, whether we are a good match isn't for you to decide, nor is it about family wealth," I said, looking at her with quiet dignity. "Two people living together need to get along and treat each other with sincerity. I don't think David and I can do that." George was so frantic he stomped his foot, grabbing my arm with desperation. "Jane, have you lost your mind? If word of this gets out, how will you ever face the village again? Hurry up and apologize to the Millers. Tell them you were just joking." "Dad, I'm not joking." I looked at my father with a mix of pleading and determination. "I know doing this will make the family lose face and that people will gossip, but I cannot wrong myself. I can't just settle for the rest of my life." My mother, Sarah, stood to the side with red-rimmed eyes. She took my other hand and said with a sob, "Jane, I know you're going through something, but marriage is a huge life event. How can you just change your mind? If you don't get engaged, people will talk. How will you ever get married later?" "Mom, I'm not afraid of gossip, and I'm not afraid of being unmarried," I said, squeezing her hand firmly. "I believe I can make a good life for myself on my own. I don't want to spend my life revolving around someone else. I don't want to live like an accessory." David looked at me, his anger gradually turning into contempt. "Jane, don't push your luck. I think you're just putting on an act to try and manipulate me." "Well, let me tell you, it won't work. If you're unwilling, there are plenty of people who would jump at the chance to marry me." "Then please, go find someone else," I replied coldly. "Either way, I'm not going through with this." With that, I walked over to the table and picked up the engagement certificate that had both our names written on it. Under the shocked gazes of everyone in the room, I ripped it in two. The paper fluttered to the ground. You actually dared to rip the engagement paper." Mrs. Miller was speechless with rage, pointing a trembling finger at me. Mr. Miller's face was grim with anger as he barked at his son. David, let's go. We're not going through with this marriage either. I don't believe for a second that our family can't find another good girl, Mr. Miller snapped. David glared at me intensely, his voice low and full of venom as he gritted his teeth. Jane, you are going to regret this. I watched as they stomped out of the living room in a fit of rage. I saw the shocked expressions on the elders' faces and the helpless, worried looks from my parents, but I didn't feel a single ounce of regret. Instead, I felt a wave of relief, so light it was liberating. I had suffered enough in my past life. In this life, I, Jane, would live only for myself. After the Millers slammed the door behind them, a deathly silence fell over the living room. You could have heard a pin drop. The elders looked back and forth at one another, their faces full of awkwardness. Finally, and without saying much more, found excuses to see themselves out. George stood where he was, his face ashen and his chest heaving. He was clearly beyond furious. Once the last elder had left, he couldn't hold it back anymore and roared at me. Jane, what kind of insanity possessed you today? Do you have any idea what you've done? I kept my head down and let him vent, offering no defense. I knew my father was a man who cared deeply about his reputation. Today's events would make it impossible for him to hold his head high in front of the neighbors. Anyone in his shoes would be angry. Sarah held my hand, her eyes rimmed with red. Wiping away tears, she sobbed. Jane, why are you being so stubborn? The Millers might be snobbish, but David is a decent-looking boy and he's smart. He might actually make something of himself in the future. By breaking off the engagement like this, our family is going to be the laughingstock of the village. Mom, I know I've put you through a lot, I said, looking up at her tear-stained face. A twinge of guilt pricked my heart, but it was nothing compared to the 10 years of agony from my past life. But I truly am unwilling to live my life with David. Rather than just getting by and torturing each other later, it's better to end it now. A clean break is better than long-term pain. Long-term pain? George let out a cold laugh, pointing toward the door. Do you know what comes after that clean break? It's the villagers whispering behind your back. It's no one ever daring to ask for your hand in marriage again. It's never being able to hold your head up for the rest of your life. How did I raise such a thoughtless girl? The more he spoke, the angrier he got, until he reached out as if to strike me. Sarah immediately shielded me, crying out, George, don't hit the girl. Jane must have her reasons. Just listen to her, okay? George's hand stopped in midair. He looked at me with eyes full of disappointment and rage. Reasons? What reasons could she have? You turned a perfectly good engagement banquet into a total disaster. What on earth could be your reason? I looked at my father, my voice calm but firm. Dad, I just feel that David and I don't click. He's too arrogant, he thinks he's above everyone else, and he's not the type of person who can settle down and lead a stable life. I don't want to marry into that family and spend my whole life working myself to the bone without ever being appreciated. These weren't just empty words. They were the lessons I had learned from a decade of suffering. David had always been like that. His ambitions were in the clouds, yet he refused to keep his feet on the ground. In my past life, the only reason he got a foothold in the city was through schemes and shortcuts, not true capability. George stunned for a moment, clearly not expecting me to say something like that. He frowned, his tone softening slightly. How do you know he's like that? It's normal for young men to have a bit of an ego. He'll settle down once he starts a family. Dad, a leopard doesn't change its spots, I said, shaking my head. There are things in people's bones that just don't change. I don't want to gamble my entire life on the hope that he might become a better person. Sarah squeezed my hand and whispered, Jane, I know you're a sensitive girl, but marriage isn't something to be so reckless about. Think it over again. If you really regret it, I'll go beg Mrs. Miller. Maybe there's still a chance to fix this. Mom, I don't regret it. I gripped her hand, my gaze incredibly steady. Even if no one ever asks to marry me again, and even if the whole village gossips, I won't regret today's decision. I can grow my own food and do my own work. I don't necessarily need a man to survive. Just then, the sound of footsteps came from outside, followed by Megan bursting through the door in a whirlwind. As soon as she entered, she shouted, Jane! I heard you kicked the Millers out. You're amazing. Megan was my best friend, straightforward, blunt, and one of the few girls in the village who wasn't tied down by traditional ideas. In my past life, after David abandoned me and everyone else avoided me like the plague, she was the only one who stayed by my side to comfort and help me. When George saw Megan, his face darkened again. "Megan, you're just in time. Help us talk some sense into Jane. She was so disrespectful today." Megan walked over to me, patted my shoulder, and said to George, "Sir, I'm not going to talk her out of it. I think Jane did the right thing. That David kid looks unreliable, and his mother is so stuck up. Even if she did marry him, Jane wouldn't be happy." "How can you help her make trouble too?" George said desperately. "If news of this gets out, how is Jane ever going to live it down?" "What's wrong with how she lives?" Megan said, tilting her chin up defiantly. "Marriage is Jane's own business. She's the only one who knows if it's right for her," Megan said. "We can't just let her marry some unreliable person she doesn't like and suffer for the rest of her life just to save face. Besides, Jane is hardworking and capable. Even if she doesn't marry, she can still make a good life for herself. What is there to be afraid of?" Megan's words were like a shot of adrenaline, making me even more certain of my choice. I looked at her with eyes full of gratitude. She was always like this, standing by my side whenever I needed her most. Sarah looked at Megan, then back at me, and let out a soft sigh. Fine. Things have already come to this. There's no point in trying to persuade you anymore. Jane, I won't force you. You chose the path ahead for yourself, so no matter how bitter or difficult it gets, you'll have to carry that burden on your own." "I know, Mom. Thank you." I pulled my mother into a hug, my eyes welling up until I was on the verge of tears. In my past life, my mother passed away before she was 60 because she spent her days and nights worrying and working herself to the bone for me. In this life, I was determined to be a good daughter and make sure she lived a comfortable life. George watched us and remained silent for a long time. Finally, he let out a weary sigh. "All right, enough talk. Since your mind is made up, I won't force you either. Just be prepared to handle the village gossip from now on. As for the Millers, I'll go over there to offer an apology and try to smooth things over. We should keep this as quiet as possible so the families don't end up in an ugly feud." "Dad, you don't need to go apologize," I said, quickly grabbing his arm. "I was the one who brought this up. If anyone goes, it should be me. Besides, we didn't do anything wrong. There's no need to apologize." "You go?" George frowned. "If you go, you'll just get a tongue lashing from Mrs. Miller. Forget it. I'll go. I'm an elder. No matter how angry she is, she won't go too far." I knew my father's temperament. Once he made a decision, there was no changing it. I simply nodded. "Then be careful, Dad. Don't get into a fight with them." George gave a grunt of affirmation and turned to walk out. Sarah watched him go, shook her head helplessly, and then led me into the inner room. "Jane, are you hungry? I'll go make you a bowl of noodles. You've had a rough day." "Mom, I'm not hungry," I said, shaking my head. "I'm just a little tired and want to rest for a bit." "Then lie down for a while. I won't disturb you." Sarah smoothed out my quilt and gave me a few more words of advice before quietly closing the door and leaving. I lay on the bed and closed my eyes. Images of my past life intertwined with the scenes of the present in my mind. 10 years of waiting in my previous life had resulted in betrayal and abandonment. Today, on my engagement day, I had decisively rejected the marriage just to rewrite my destiny. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The village gossip, the trouble from the Millers, my parents' worries, and an unknown future were all waiting for me. But I wasn't afraid. I had survived the bitterness of my past life. In this life, I had the courage and the confidence to use my own 2 hands to build a different kind of life. I don't know how long I lay there before Megan's voice came from outside. "Jane, are you awake? I brought you something to eat." I opened my eyes and got up to open the door. Megan was holding 2 steamed white buns and a boiled egg, which she pressed into my hands. "Hurry up and eat. My mom had me bring these over. She said there was no way you ate properly today." I took the buns, feeling a warm glow in my heart. "Megan, thank you, and thank your mom for me." "Oh, stop being so polite with me." Megan pulled me down to sit and whispered, "Jane, I heard that when David left, he swore he'd make you regret this. You'd better be careful. He's a petty guy. He might try to cause trouble for you." I took a bite of a bun and smiled faintly. "I'm not afraid of him. If he actually dares to come looking for trouble, I'll settle the score with him once and for all. Anyway, I'm done with him now. There's nothing he can do to me." Megan looked at me, her eyes full of admiration. "Jane, you're not the same as you used to be. You used to be so timid, but now you've become so brave and independent. I'm really happy for you." I smiled but didn't say anything. I knew the reason for this change was that the pain of my past life had finally woken me up. I was no longer the Jane who revolved around a man and suffered in silence. I was going to live for myself. "Oh, right, Jane," Megan said as something suddenly occurred to her. She leaned in closer. "I heard that someone in town has been buying up local mountain goods lately, and the prices are pretty good. There are plenty of wild greens, mushrooms, and walnuts on the hill behind our village. We could go pick some and sell them in town. We might even make a little spending money." My heart stirred. It was 1991, and private businesses were just starting to take off. The town markets were becoming more and more lively. Buying and selling mountain goods was indeed a viable way to make money. In my past life, I had been so single-mindedly focused on domestic life that I never once thought about making my own money. In this life, this might just be my first real opportunity. Is that true? I looked at Megan, a glimmer of light appearing in my eyes. "Then let's go to the back hill tomorrow to pick mountain goods." "Yes, definitely." Megan became excited instantly. "I'll come by for you first thing tomorrow morning. We'll go together and gather as much as we can so we can make some decent money." Watching Megan's excitement, I couldn't help but smile. I knew that at this very moment, my path to turning my life around had officially begun. No matter what difficulties I encountered in the future, I wouldn't back down. I knew that only by relying on myself could I live a life worth living. The next day, I woke up before dawn. It was still gray outside, and the roosters hadn't even started their first crow. I got up quietly, afraid of waking my parents. After the huge scene yesterday, they hadn't slept well all night, and I didn't want them worrying about me anymore. I found an old bamboo basket, dug out a pair of sturdy cloth shoes, and tied the laces carefully. Megan was right. You live off the land you're on. The back hill was full of resources. As long as I was willing to put in the work, I didn't have to worry about not being able to make money. Just as I walked into the yard, I heard a noise from the kitchen. I pushed the door open and saw Sarah crouching by the stove, starting a fire. Steam was already rising from the pot. "Mom, why are you up so early?" Sarah turned to look at me, her eyes filled with maternal concern. "I knew you were going to the back hill with Megan. I steamed some sweet potatoes for you to take on the road. The paths up there are steep, so be careful. Don't go too deep into the woods." My nose tingled with emotion. I walked over and hugged her. "Mom, I know. Don't worry. The money isn't important," she whispered. "Just come back safe and sound." She stuffed 2 warm sweet potatoes into my pocket. "If anyone talks trash, just ignore them. You still have your father and me." I nodded, without speaking, holding that warmth tightly in my heart. In my previous life, I hadn't let her enjoy a single day of comfort. In this life, I was determined to give her a better life. As soon as I stepped outside, Megan was already waiting for me at the crossroads. She was carrying an even larger basket and was full of energy. "Jane, this way." The two of us walked along the trail toward the back hill. The way was quiet, save for our footsteps and the chirping of insects. As day began to break, we ran into a few villagers heading to the fields. They gave us strange looks, pointing and whispering amongst themselves. "Isn't that Jane? She actually rejected the Miller boys' proposal yesterday. She's gone crazy, throwing away a perfectly good marriage. Let's see who dares to take her now." I heard the Miller kid said she'll come crawling back to beg them sooner or later. Megan was so angry she wanted to turn back and argue, but I grabbed her and shook my head gently. "Don't bother with them. Let's just go. Arguing is useless. I'm going to use my actual life to slap them in the face." The vegetation on the back hill was lush. The dew was heavy, and it wasn't long before my pant legs were soaked. Relying on the blurry memories of my past life, I specifically headed toward the spots where wild mushrooms were thickest and the greens were most tender. Following behind me, Megan grew increasingly surprised. "Jane, how do you know where everything is? You're more familiar with this place than I am, and I grew up running around these hills." I smiled and didn't explain, only saying I remembered the spots from when I was a kid. In truth, I remembered exactly which slopes had the thickest mushrooms and which trees had the most wild walnuts. These were things I had figured out bit by bit during my lonely hours in my previous life. Back then, I only thought about adding a bit of food to the house. I never imagined these things could be turned into cash. Our baskets were soon full. Megan was huffing and puffing from the exertion, but the more I worked, the more energized I felt. I had only one thought: gather more, earn more, and escape the days of being dependent on others as soon as possible. By the time the sun was overhead, both our baskets were overflowing. That's enough. That's enough. Any more and we won't be able to carry them," Megan said, wiping her sweat. Her eyes lit up as she looked at the 2 baskets full of mountain goods. "With this much, we're definitely going to make a lot of money." We carried our loads back, and just as we reached the village entrance, we ran into David. He was standing by the roadside, though I didn't know who he was waiting for. When he saw Megan and me carrying baskets full of mountain goods, covered in dirt, his brow immediately furrowed. His eyes were filled with undisguised contempt. "Is this all the ambition you have, Jane?" He crossed his arms, his tone arrogant. "Giving up the chance to be a miller just to go pick through trash on the mountain? Aren't you embarrassed?" Megan exploded instantly. "David, keep your mouth shut. We're earning money with our own 2 hands. That's a lot better than someone like you who thinks he's a big shot but only knows how to talk big." David's face darkened. "I'm talking to Jane. What does this have to do with you?" I pulled Megan behind me and looked at David calmly. "What I do is my business. It has nothing to do with you. We're finished, so stop trying to manage my life." "Finished?" He let out a cold laugh and took a step forward, lowering his voice. "Jane, don't push your luck. I know you were just trying to get a rise out of me yesterday. You regret it now, don't you? Just come over, apologize, and we can fix the engagement papers. I'll act like none of this ever happened." He spoke with a patronizing tone, as if my rejection was some monumental loss for me. I found it utterly pathetic. In my past life, I was fooled by this exact act. I thought he was capable, thought he could be someone I could lean on. The result was 10 years of heartache and a cold-blooded betrayal. I looked up, my gaze icy and detached. I spoke clearly, emphasizing every word. "David, listen to me. I, Jane, would rather spend my entire life on that mountain picking wild greens than have a single thing to do with you ever again. If you want an apology, go find someone else." The arrogance on his face froze instantly, replaced by sheer disbelief that I would humiliate him so thoroughly. "You." He gritted his teeth in fury. "You're going to regret this. When I go out and make the big bucks, don't you dare come crawling back, 'cause I won't look twice at you." "I'll be waiting," I said flatly. I picked up my basket and walked straight past him. Megan shot him a fierce glare before following me. After a few steps, I looked back. David was still standing there, his face ashen. I felt no ripple of emotion, only the light, airy relief of being completely free. This man was once the curse of my life. From now on, he was just a stranger on the road. When I got home, my parents were stunned to see the 2 overflowing baskets of mountain goods. "You 2 picked all this?" George walked over and lifted a basket, testing the weight. "It's heavy." "Mom, Dad, we're planning to go to town this afternoon to sell these and get some cash," I said with a smile as I set the things down. Sarah immediately pulled me over, her brow furrowing with worry as she saw the small scratches on my hands from the brambles. "Look at your hands. They're all cut up. There's no rush to make money. Don't work yourself to death." "Mom, it's fine. Just minor scratches," I said, pulling my hand back. "I want to earn my own money so I don't have to live at the mercy of others." George remained silent for a while, then let out a sigh. He went into the inner room and brought out an old cloth pouch. Opening it, he revealed a few crumpled bills. "This is a little money we've saved up. Take it." He pressed the money into my hand. "Take the bus to town. Don't walk, it's too tiring. If anyone tries to bully you, remember to come back and tell me." Looking at those small bills, my palms felt warm. My father might scold me for being thoughtless with his mouth, but in his heart, he still loved me. "Dad, I don't want it. I can earn it myself," I said, pushing the money back. "If I tell you to take it, take it." George's face hardened, but his tone softened. "It's your first time doing business in town. Don't let anyone cheat you. I believe in you. As long as you're hardworking, you'll make a good life for yourself." My eyes grew hot, and I nodded vigorously. "I will. I'll work hard." That afternoon, Megan and I carried the mountain goods and hopped on the bus to town. The bus was bumpy, and the scenery outside blurred past. I looked ahead, my heart feeling bright. In my past life, I was trapped in a tiny village, wasting my entire existence revolving on one man. In this life, I was stepping out of my front door, toward the market, and toward a life of my own. When we reached town, the market was bustling with people. We found a corner to set out our goods. As soon as we were ready, people started gathering around. These mushrooms are so fresh. How much? The wild greens looked tender. Weigh some out for me. I mirrored how the others did it, quoting prices, weighing the items, and collecting the money. I was a bit nervous at first, but I quickly grew more skilled. Megan helped me call out to customers, and the two of us were happily busy. By the time the sun was setting, everything was sold out. I gripped the money in my hand, my palms sweaty. I counted it over and over, a total of $12.50. In 1991, for us, this was a significant sum. Megan looked at the money and almost jumped with excitement. "Jane, we actually made money! So much!" I smiled too, feeling a heavy sense of security. This wasn't a windfall from the sky or a handout from others. It was money I earned bit by bit, picking and selling with my own two hands. Relying on yourself felt so incredibly grounding. We took the money and first went to the general store to buy salt and soy sauce. Then I bought a roll of floral fabric that my mother had been eyeing but was too frugal to buy, and a pack of cigarettes for my father. I folded the remaining money carefully and tucked it into my inner pocket. On the bus ride back, Megan talked excitedly without stopping, planning to pick more tomorrow and sell more the day after, imagining we could make money every day. Holding the money I had earned myself for the first time, I didn't sleep very soundly that night. It wasn't just excitement. It was because I finally had a sense of security. It turned out that without a husband's family or a man to rely on, I could still stand on my own 2 feet. Just as the sky was beginning to turn gray at dawn, I got up to pack my things. I neatly straightened the small bills left over from yesterday's sale and checked the cloth bag and small scale I needed for town. My mother was already busy in the kitchen, and seeing me up, Sarah turned and smiled. "I steamed some buns for you and boiled some eggs too. Take them for the road. Don't push yourself too hard today, and stay safe." "I know, Mom." I walked over to help her feed the fire. "Once I earn a little more money, I'm going to buy you a brand new outfit." Sarah smiled and patted my hand. "Mom doesn't need new clothes. Having you safe and sound makes me feel better than anything else." A warmth flooded my heart, and I didn't say anything more, but I kept those words to myself. Sooner or later, I was going to make sure she lived a life where she didn't have to pinch every penny. Just as I finished packing, Megan arrived in a whirlwind. As soon as she stepped inside, she lowered her voice. "Jane, this is bad. David went around the village yesterday telling everyone that you only rejected the engagement to get attention, that you're purposely showing your face in public selling things just to force his family to back down." My hands paused for a second, and then I let out a cold laugh. It was just like him. When he lacked actual ability, he resorted to bad-mouthing others behind their backs. "Let him talk," I said flatly. "The mouth is on his face. I can't control what he says. I'm earning my money, and no amount of talk from him is going to stop me from living my life." Megan blinked in surprise, then gave me a big thumbs up. "You really have moved on. Let's go then. We'll pick even more today, make more money, and drive him crazy with spite." We were just about to head out when my father called us back. George came out of the inner room with an old canvas bag and handed me a pair of nearly new work gloves. "Take these. There are lots of thorns on the mountain. Don't let them prick your hands. If anyone talks behind your back, don't take it to heart. Your dad believes in you." I took the gloves, my fingertips feeling a slight tingle. My father used to value his reputation above all else, but now he was standing up to protect me. I would never forget this gesture for as long as I lived. I'll remember, Dad. The back hill was still lush and green, but my mindset today was completely different from yesterday. Yesterday was a test. Today was a conviction. I specifically picked the wild goods that looked the best and commanded the highest prices. I moved nimbly and had a sharp eye. Megan followed behind me, marveling the whole way. "Jane, you're practically better at this than people who have lived on this mountain their whole lives." I smiled but didn't reply. Those treasures hidden in the grass and under the shade of trees were things I had memorized bit by bit during the endless, lonely years of my past life. Naturally, no one else could compare. By noon, our 2 baskets were packed so full they were overflowing at the rims. We didn't even stop to rest, heading straight for the town. As soon as we reached the market and found a spot to set out our goods, a shrill, biting voice drifted over from nearby. "Well, if it isn't Jane. Giving up being a Miller daughter-in-law just to come here and be a street peddler. You're really moving down in the world, aren't you? I looked up to see Mrs. Miller. I hadn't realized she'd come to town as well. She was standing there with her hands on her hips, staring at me with utter disdain. People nearby were instantly drawn to the scene, pointing and whispering. Megan immediately stood by my side and glared at her. "Mrs. Miller, watch your tongue. Jane is earning money with her own two hands, fair and square. That's a lot better than you sitting at home gossiping." Mrs. Miller squinted as she looked me up and down. Earning money? I think she just realizes nobody wants her and she's desperate to find a way to survive. Let me tell you, don't you go getting any ideas about our David. Our family has no interest in a girl who parades herself around in public like this. I slowly stood up, my face expressionless. My voice wasn't loud, but it was clear and firm. "Ma'am, my engagement to David was broken off long ago. Where I am and what I do has absolutely nothing to do with the Miller family. If you're here to buy something, you're welcome. If you're here to cause trouble, then please leave. Don't interfere with my business." Mrs. Miller hadn't expected me to be so firm, and she was momentarily choked for words. Then she got even angrier. "You little brat, you dare talk back to me? You've clearly lost all respect for your elders." "I'm just being reasonable," I said, looking at her with a calm gaze. "I'm the one who rejected the marriage. I'm the one who chose this path. I'm not stealing, robbing, or cheating anyone. Why shouldn't I be allowed to stand here? On the other hand, it's your son who lacks the ability to handle things, so he has to let his mother come out and make a scene. Aren't you afraid of people laughing at you if word gets out?" A few muffled chuckles broke out from the crowd. Mrs. Miller's face turned from red to white, and she shook with rage. You dare insult our family?" "I'm not insulting anyone. I'm just stating facts." I leaned over to organize the mountain goods in front of me and said indifferently, "If you keep making a scene here and cost me the money I would have made, are you going to pay me back?" Mrs. Miller was left speechless by my question. She wanted to throw a tantrum, but was afraid of being made a laughingstock. Finally, she shot me a vicious glare. "Just you wait. You'll regret this soon enough." With that, she turned and slunk away in embarrassment. The crowd dispersed, and those who remained began to ask about the fresh mountain goods. I wasn't affected in the least, continuing to greet customers with a smile, weighing items, and collecting money with practiced ease. Before long, more than half the goods were sold. Just then, a steady-looking man wearing a mouse suit walked over. He knelt down to examine the mushrooms. "Young lady, these mushrooms are high quality. Can you bring these in every day?" I looked up and recognized him as Thomas, the man from the town's supply and marketing cooperative who bought mountain goods year-round. I had heard his name in my past life. He was an honest man who didn't cheat people. "Mr. Thomas, I can bring them every single day," I said sincerely. "The quantity will be sufficient, and I guarantee the quality." Thomas nodded. "I can see you're an honest worker and not a corner cutter. From now on, I'll take whatever you have. I'll even give you a cent more per pound than the market price. How does that sound?" My heart leaped with joy. This was no longer just about making small individual sales. I had secured a stable distribution channel. "Thank you, Mr. Thomas. I'll make sure to deliver them to you on time." He bought up the rest of my stock on the spot, paid me, and we set a delivery time for the next day. After Thomas left, Megan grabbed my hand, her voice trembling with excitement. "Jane, we did it. We won't have to stand out here in the sun and wind at the market anymore, and we can sell even more." I gripped the money in my hand, feeling steady and bright. Today, we had earned $18.30. Combined with yesterday's earnings, I already had over $30. In the rural areas of 1991, this was no small sum. We didn't linger. We bought the oil, salt, soy sauce, and vinegar the house was lacking, specifically picked out some synthetic fabric for my mother, and bought a pack of good cigarettes for my father before happily heading back. Just as we entered the village, we ran into David. He must have heard about Mrs. Miller making a scene in town and was waiting here for me. He looked miserable. "Jane, are you doing this on purpose?" He blocked my path, his tone hostile. "My mom went to find you. Couldn't you have just been the bigger person? Did you have to make such a scene and make the whole village laugh at the Millers?" I stopped and looked at him calmly. "Your mother was the one who went to town to start trouble. I didn't provoke her. David, stop bothering me. We've been over for a long time." "Over?" He let out a cold laugh. So now that you're doing well for yourself, you think you're too good for me? Let me tell you, don't think you're a big shot just because you're making a little pocket change. When I go out and make real money, you won't even be fit to carry my shoes." I gave him a dry look. "Then go make your big money. I don't care for it, and I'm not counting on it." With that, I walked around him and headed straight home. Behind me, David screamed in a rage, "Jane, you're going to regret this. You'll definitely regret this." I didn't stop my pace, and I didn't even look back. Regret? The thing I regretted most was being blind in my past life and wasting 10 years on him for nothing. Being able to escape early in this life was the luckiest thing that ever happened to me. When I got home, I handed the things I bought to my parents. Dad held the cigarettes, the corners of his mouth turning up despite himself, even as he muttered, "What did you spend money on this for? My old brand was fine." Mom touched the new fabric, her eyes turning red. "This fabric is so nice. I haven't worn anything this good in years." "It'll only get better," I said seriously, looking at them. "Mom, Dad, I'm going to earn even more money from now on so you can live a good life." George looked at me, his eyes full of gratification. He let out a soft sigh. "Jane, I misjudged you before. You've grown up and have a mind of your own. Your father is proud of you." At that moment, all the grievances and hardships from my past life vanished into thin air. I didn't rely on luck, I didn't rely on a husband, and I didn't rely on in-laws. I relied on my own two hands to earn money, to earn dignity, and to earn back my parents' approval. Outside the window, the sky was growing dark, but my heart was full of light. The path from my previous life, the one that was bitter until the very end, had been completely severed.